In the winter of '63, I was 8 years old. Now, my mother had been pacing back and forth through that old place we rented by the Warehouse district in town, and you could just see the weariness in her face and hear the stress in her voice when she asked my big sister what we should do. Now, my sister Jan was only 5 years older than me, but at 13, she was the closest thing to an adult mom had to talk to. You see, we'd been waiting for 2 days for Dad to come home with money for food and coal and hopefully enough to get the electricity back on. Waiting became a way of life for us after our older brother Dickie passed away and Dad chose drinking over his family. Now, I could see Mom was about to cry, and so I took my younger brother and little sister up the stairs with me to our room. The baby stayed in her arms where she could keep him warm. Now, wearing our winter coats, me and my brother Scott had just finished scraping our names in the window frost with our fingernails when we heard a car turn onto our street and slowly roll down the hill to a stop in front of our house. Now, we didn't recognize that '58 Burgundy Buick with the chrome visor and matching grille that turned down into a frown. We saw a couple in the front seat and a second pair in the back. Well, that rear door swung open and out spilled loud laughter along with our old man. I crept down the hall to the top of the stairs and heard Mom saying that she'd been worried about him. She was afraid something had happened. Mom murmured something I couldn't make out, and he said, "What money? I ain't got no money. I just came for a clean shirt." In a timid voice, she asked what he did with it, but she knew he drank it. The night before, she sent me and my sister out into the snow to the bars to see if we could find him. We didn't. We looked through the doors and windows of every bar we knew, but he was nowhere to be found this time. Well, I heard him coming up the stairs and ducked back into my room. We listened as his dresser drawer opened and then closed again. Through the crack in the door, I saw him come out and go back down the stairs. In an injured tone, Mom asked about the woman in the back seat of the Buick. Well, he fumbled for an excuse, saying it was the wife of so-and-so, and they were just giving her a ride home. The front door slammed, and we saw him climb into the back seat with her and watched it slowly roll away. Well, we had pears for supper that night that he'd brought home from somewhere the month before, and in the bottom of that crate there were a few good ones left, and we just cut the soft spots out of the ones that weren't. Well, later that night, it went from bad to worse when an Arctic chill blew down from the north and the temperature dropped to a dangerous low. We were afraid the water pipes would freeze and burst. Well, my sister stepped up with 50 cents she'd earned from babysitting and said, "Mom, Danny and I can go to the coal yard and buy enough fuel to keep the house from freezing overnight." Well, it would have been nice to use it for bread and milk, but that wasn't going to happen. Not tonight. Well, we got out our sled and an old bushel basket, and off we went. Now, our teeth were chattering before we reached the end of our block. We rounded the corner and leaned into the icy wind that was biting our ears and stinging our cheeks. It didn't take long, and I fell behind. I looked up and saw a Christmas tree through a window, and there stood a man in just his shirt sleeves, holding up a baby to admire the beautiful decorations. Well, Jan saw I wasn't with her anymore and stormed back through the snow to get me. You see, I was a source of constant irritation to my sister, and she swore I was born wearing rose-colored glasses and came out with a head full of nothing but silly daydreams. Well, I was just about to reach the full glow of this Norman Rockwell moment when she cuffed me on the back of my head. "Wake up, stop your stupid daydreaming, and come on!" Well, I hurried along behind her, but stole one last glance over my shoulder, wishing it could be that way for us. When we got to the coal yard, the gates were closed for the night, and under the street light stood a great big red steel box that looked to me like a giant soda machine. Well, Jan took off her mittens and got out her quarters and pushed them into the slot. She turned the big knob on the front and waited for the coal to spill out of the chute and into my basket. Nothing came out. Desperately, she turned the knob again and pounded on the front of that machine. Still nothing. Her little head went down, her shoulders came up, and she began to sob. "Jan, what's the matter?" "That stupid machine. It took the money and kept the coal. Now we've got nothing. I am so sick of living like this." Well, seeing her so hopeless left me sick and empty inside. I rushed up and hugged her as tight as I could, and there was nothing warm between us but the tears flowing down her cheeks. Now, how long we held each other under that street light in the swirling wind and snow, I couldn't tell you. Then she pushed me away and said, "We might as well go home now. There's nothing else we can do." And angrily she kicked at the snow and uncovered 3 shiny black pieces of coal. She picked them up and dropped them in the basket. I swept the snow away with my foot and found a few more and put them in with hers. "Look, Jan, by the gate, there's a whole bunch more." We ran over and gathered it all up, and our spirits burned brighter and brighter as we found a piece over here and a chunk over there, and soon our basket overflowed with more coal than we would have ever gotten with the 50 cents that was still stuck in that stupid machine. Well, my sister wanted her money back. She stuck out her bottom lip, walked up to that machine, cursed it real good, and kicked it as hard as she could. And out spilled 6 shiny quarters. Now, I don't remember how long the fire kept us warm, and I don't recall what we did with all those quarters. But I remember that night often, and I remember it fondly, as clear as a snapshot in a picture book. Now, we didn't always get what we wanted, but from that moment on, we treasured the gifts we had, each other. Always live with hope, recognize your gifts, and be good to one another.